Hey everyone, we are live at bullbuster.net, and today I'm here to talk to you about how fishing line is made. Now we've got three types of fishing lines. I'm going to go into the features of these just in the beginning as an intro. So we've got monofilament fishing line, we've got fluorocarbon fishing line, and we've got braided fishing line. So why would you want one over the other? Well, for the monofilament fishing line, you're going to want this as a line that's relatively low cost, has some give and take for the fish's mouth, and lasts a decent amount of time. The fluorocarbon fishing line, you're going to want a line, it's for you if you're looking for a line that's see-through, and it's really more of a leader material than any other type of line. And a leader material is a line that you put at the front of your line, so that and it's connected to the hook, so the fish doesn't see it, and that the mouth of the fish doesn't break your line. So you might be using a thinner line in the back and a thicker line in the front. So the leader material, fluorocarbon, is a great leader material. However, it is more expensive than mono because of certain features that it has. Now, the braided fishing line is a type of line that's kind of like a rope. And why you would want to use this line, it's got very little stretch, it's very thin and very strong, and while it's expensive, it lasts a long time. So it's worth the expense of buying the braided line. You don't have to change it as often as the monofilament line. Good investment. There's also things where you can combine all these lines, and sometimes you're going to be using all three lines at the same time. But alas, this video is about how fishing line is made. So let's start with the first two lines, which are the most similar: fluorocarbon fishing line and monofilament fishing line. The fluorocarbon fishing line and the monofilament fishing line are both a plastic of sorts. And they're really like a spaghetti in the way that they're made. Actually, a lot of the original technology for making these lines is developed in Italy, or was developed in Italy. And being an Italian myself, think about it as kind of like a pasta. It's a one line that's extruded out, and that's how plastics are worked with. You extrude them out, you stretch, you melt down a plastic, and you extrude it out, and it becomes one long piece of spaghetti. And that's your monofilament spaghetti. So, and your fluorocarbon too, because fluorocarbon, technically it's a monofilament because it's one string, monofilament. So what's going on with the monofilament and the fluorocarbon fishing line is you got a big hopper of line, and you got these plastic pellets. They go into the hopper, they get heated up, they get pushed out, and they become a long piece of spaghetti. Now, monofilament, like spaghetti, has different qualities. So, depending on how you melt it, depending on how you stretch it, and depending on how you cool it down, you're going to get different qualities. The main difference for the monofilament and the fluorocarbon line is the plastic that goes in. So the qualities of the chemistry of the plastic pellets that are being melted down to create this line. Now, there's a lot that goes into the actual extrusion process, and the actual line and the quality is going to have different properties depending on how fast the chemical is melted, how fast it's extruded, how fast it's cooled, how fast it's stretched, and how it goes on the spool. So this is the beginning of this process, right? You're visualizing a big hopper with plastic pellets going into it. The plastic pellets come out, they get melted through the extrusion process, and you end up with a big bulk spool line at the other end of this process. So I'm going to leave this part of the process for monofilament at this bulk spool right now. Now, and for fluorocarbon, at this bulk spool. Now let's go over to the braided fishing line, and let's get it to this point of the process of the bulk spool. So braid is, like the name says, it's line braided together, braided fishing line. So braided fishing line starts out as small sets of fiber. Now there's all the chemistry in this stuff before, not going to go into that. And the braid, it starts as these little fibers. They're going to be woven together into one rope made of multiple fibers. So braided fishing line could be made up of, it could be made up of 2 fibers, and technically it's a braided fishing line. That's not a great braid, and you're really not going to see that on the market. The smallest amount of fibers you're going to see on the market is 4. And 4 fibers is really good for lighter lines, and I'm going to put a link in the video in the description below to an article about this that includes videos about this. But yeah, you're weaving together this rope to create a braid, and the 4 carriers is a machine with 4 bobbins on it, and they're being wound together and braided together to create one line. And the reason this is good for lighter lines is because it gives you a kind of rough edge. And when you're a light braid, think about it as like you're a small dude. You got to be scrappy, right? You got to be rough around the edges, and have stuff not, kind of roll off you. And so let's think of a braid in this case when we're going to cast it into, let's say, a kelp. In Southern California, there's a lot of kelp, and you're putting it in there, and it needs this rough edges so you can rip it out because it's so thin. It's not got a lot of abrasion resistance otherwise. So this 4-strand braid is good for lighter lines because of this scrappiness, this abrasion resistance. So now we go to our 8-carrier braid, which is literally 4 spools of fiber being wound together. 8 spools of fiber being wound together to create a rope. And this is going to be a smoother finished braid. Now if you want extra smooth, you're going to go up to, sometimes you see 16-carrier braid. And it just gives it's a really smooth braid, and it's going to go through your guides nicely, it's going to cast through the air nicely. It's not going to be as abrasion resistant. Yeah, so for the braid, remember we're getting back to the bulk spool. So for this braid, we're winding these all together, and they're going up to a bulk spool. And now with this how fishing line's made topic, we've got in front of us, we've got a bulk fluorocarbon spool, we've got a bulk monofilament spool, and we've got a bulk braided spool. So we've extruded for the fluorocarbon and the monofilament, and we've braided for the braid. Yeah. So there we go. Yeah. So now we're going to take these bulk spools and we're going to wind them down onto a smaller spool, to multiple smaller spools, because for retail, maybe just for retail, but for how much one person needs, a lot of people are not going to need a huge bulk spool, and they may be not willing to, they have so many other priorities going on that they're not going to want that big, huge spool fishing line to begin with. All in this case that's needed is to complete the spooling of, let's say, 1 reel, right? So you might pay a little bit higher price per yard for this smaller spool because it goes through more process. Remember, we just covered the process of of it was in the machine, it got extruded, it's on this bulk spool. The price per yard is going to be the best at this point, right, on the bulk spool. But now we're moving down to these smaller spools. Now we got to spool them down. So we need some piece of machinery that's going to spool it down from these big bulk spools down to these small spools that you might spool one reel with or several reels with, or put the backing on one reel with. So this machine is similar to a lathe. I don't know if you've ever done any woodworking, but a lathe is the machine that's used to make a baseball bat. And it's got a motor that spins, and in this case we put a spool on that motor. And so now we're breaking down bulk into smaller spools. And that's really the last step that goes into the manufacturing process for fishing line, is the breakdown from the bulk to the smaller spool. Then we put a label on it, and then it's sent out to you. Alright guys, well I hope you enjoyed this video on how fishing line is made. And yeah, our mission at bullbuster.net is to help you spend more time fishing. And one of the main ways that we do that is to give you fishing line direct to you, and to provide you with information about fishing that you might not get elsewhere. Tight lines.